Mohamad Al-Issa, the Saudi official, at her office and praised him. Mohamad Al-Issa was the Saudi Minister of Justice, and he established what people call Terrorism Court.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Ukrainian armed forces have badly damaged the Russian warship, the Moskva. Reports are that the Moskva is sinking. It has led to a number of memes, including this one that says the Moskva has been promoted to submarine. If our uncharacteristically offends you, take a look at this picture. It doesn't appear to be much, and the face is deliberately hidden by hospital orders. But the picture is of a 10-year-old girl named Yana who lost both of her legs in the Russian missile strike on the crowded train station in Kramatorsk. From London, a bit of a protest march for Ukraine organized by trade unionists.
Now! What do we want? Free Ukraine! When do we want it? Now! Free, free, free Ukraine! 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 Free, free, slow down. Putin, Putin, Putin! Putin, Putin, Putin!
Because back in whenever it was
We stand with our brothers and sisters in Ukraine against the Russian invasion, against Putin, against the ethno-nationalist slaughter that's going on a few hours air ride from here. Come and join our demonstration outside Downing Street to call for more, faster sanctions, for more arms to Ukraine, for debt relief to Ukraine, and for workers' solidarity across borders, supporting the Russian and Belarusian brave people who are standing up against their own fascist oligarchs.
Don't know if you noticed this banner of the National Union of Mine Workers. This is a much storied British union, very reduced now after being smashed by Prime Minister Thatcher decades ago. Waiting for American unions to have a rally for Ukraine. Now more of the march and rally in New Haven in solidarity with Ukraine. We begin with Syrian-American Wael Faraj speaking up near the Yale bookstore.
My name is Wael Faraj. I'm a Syrian-American activist, and I've been working on human rights for the last 10 years. Syria, I've been closely witnessing the Russian invading in Syria and bombing, the mass bombing in Syria, and killing hundreds of thousands of people through the years. And we all witness the failure of our officials here to stop Putin from continuing killing our people, destroying the infrastructure, city. So by the end of the day, when we look at Ukraine today, we know that our failure of stopping Putin in Syria encouraged him to invade Ukraine. So our message to our officials, congressmen, senators, enough is enough. And people, they deserve their own freedom. Those countries been free for years, and those people born as a free people. And enough is enough. Our American official standing, the political standing, is weak, and enough to be weak. We can't accept this no more, because we are all free people, and we are the people. We are the people. So Putin is a serial criminal targeting countries and nations, and that needs to be stopped now. They have to stop bombing Syria, and they have to stop bombing Ukraine. The freedom of Syria is the freedom of Ukraine, and the freedom of Ukraine is the freedom of Syria. And that's what we have to say here. Our last message to those who put their lives on the front line and they say goodbye for the loved one. We wanted to tell them that we all, as a free people, all around the world, we are witnessing and watching your bravery and appreciating your sacrificing. And we are all here standing by your side, and I hope this word will reach there. And we are all here doing everything possible to support you. And our message also for those people are in Ukraine. We promise you that we will never stop until Syria and Ukraine are a free country again.
From Ukraine to Syria. From Ukraine to Syria. Stop Putin's wars. From Ukraine to Syria. From Ukraine to Syria. Stop Putin's wars. Right now it's like late on the next.
Well, hey, me and Evan went.
Oh,
Yeah. You weren't even there.
Turn around and chase.
The marchers braved the rain and cold and stopped at the Wells Fargo Bank. Longtime climate activist Melinda Tuhus spoke.
So we're at Wells Fargo here because Wells Fargo is one of the 4 biggest banks in the world funding all of these fossil fuel projects that really need to stop. Too many wars have been fought over, funded by, or justified on behalf of fossil fuels. As Ukrainian climate scientist Svetlana Krakowska has said, human-induced climate change and war against Ukraine have direct connections and the same roots. They are fossil fuels and humanity's dependence on them. So finally, the Biden administration and the Republicans agree on something, ramping up production of oil and gas, sending it to Europe to replace Russian gas, and tapping the strategic oil reserve at home in a gamble to slightly reduce gasoline prices at the pump, which may not even work. So we think instead of doing all that, we need to ramp up renewables.
Yes!
We need the president to declare a climate emergency and use the Defense Production Act to build all kinds of clean energy like heat pumps and wind turbines and all that, and sell those to Europe instead of the oil and the gas.
The conclusion of the event on next week's program. Also, want to call attention to a celebration in Keeney Park on April 23rd in the afternoon by climate activists. The bureaucratic murder of Fatimah al-Masri is even sadder than we reported. We talked about her at the start of the program last week. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem tweets that her parents had been trying to conceive a child since 2012 and used most of their savings on fertility treatments. In 2020, Fatima was born apparently healthy, but after 9 months, it was found there was a hole in her heart. She needed advanced medical treatment that could be found in Jerusalem, but her parents were never given the permit for her to go there. Her last words were, "Mama, I love you. I love Father." Perhaps medical personnel in the United States might band together to try to end this bureaucratic medical murder by Israel. This is a picture from Jenin camp on the West Bank. It's not a new picture. It's destruction Israeli troops caused 20 years ago, savaging most of the camp and destroying the homes of 13,000 people. This is what it takes to maintain an apartheid system. We bring it up now because Jenin is once again facing numerous raids by Israeli forces in punishment for a terrorist attack on Israelis. Collective punishment. We link to the article by Jennifer Lowenstein, who took the picture 20 years ago, and this other amazing picture of camp destruction, which she called the Gaping House. Now another section of my interview with Saudi dissident and activist al-Ahmed. We were talking about the 81 executions that took place on March 12th. We also discuss what's happening in Yemen, a truce that at the moment appears to be holding. Of the people who were executed, did the families get the bodies? Were they returned?
No. Saudi Arabia has this sort of draconian and ugly practice of not giving the bodies of the victims of people who it executes to their family, and it just steals or snatches their body. And we're talking now about hundreds of people who have been executed for political reasons or for political crimes. And so we are looking at a few hundred people who have not been returned, their bodies have not been returned to their family members.
For instance, Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr, who was executed in 2016.
Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr is a prime example, but we're talking about many others who either were killed or in the streets in protests or in their cars, or being executed. So hundreds of people who were their bodies still have been snatched by the Saudi state. And it's important to note this. This is done without any legal process within the Saudi system itself. So this is obviously this is a crime, but I have not seen the United Nations or any quote unquote civilized government speak about it, let alone condemn this practice. I mean,
that brings us to the U.S. reaction, the government reaction to the executions. How would you describe it?
I mean, there was no reaction. In fact, I think a reporter tried to get a reaction from the State Department spokesman, Ned Price, and he refused to say anything about it. I mean, that, in my opinion, I think that was the best outcome, because if he had said something, he would have claimed to have, to care about these things. He, just saying a word here and there and try to pretend that you care, but at the same time you don't. I think you get some points by some people. You fool some people. So in a way, in my opinion, I think it was best that Ned Price and whichever state that really do not care about these victims, I think it would insult their memory. So I was not expecting. I mean, there is not a change in U.S. policy.
But didn't Biden say he was going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah?
I mean, I think Biden, is a very pragmatic. He's a political animal who have said this before, have done things that within the U.S. context that were considered racist and bigoted, and then he shifted. We all know he voted for that crime bill that targeted Black people, and of course now he changed his tune. He's a politician, and he's going to say whatever gets him elected and keeps him in power. And I don't myself think of Biden or Blinken or any other leader as a moral authority on human rights. I would not believe anything that they say until I see it happen. Their words do not mean much. I mean, that's the nature of politics, unfortunately.
So let's go back now to the executions. You tweeted on March 14th, "You can't make this up." 2 days after the Saudis massacred 81 protesters and others, senior U.S. official in charge of promoting democracy and human rights praises Saudi official who was in charge of mass executions, torture, and other human rights crimes, in addition to his anti-Semitism. Could you explain?
Yes, Mohamad Al-Issa came to Washington in those days and met with Asra. I forgot her name now. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Labor, and Human Rights, and she is the highest Muslim official ever in the State Department. So she received Mohamad Al-Issa, the Saudi official, at her office and praised him. Mohamad Al-Issa was the Saudi Minister of Justice, and he established what people call Terrorism Court, the same court that has that basically rendered these execution or these death penalties against the 81 and many others, and also prosecuted human rights activists and women rights activists like Rujan Al-Hadloul and others. He is the one who built this court and engineered it and set the laws. And in fact, legally, these sentences were carried under a code that Mohamad Al-Issa, when he was the head of the Saudi court, he was also the president of the Supreme Court and other courts. So he built the laws and the legal narrative to give the Saudi state the right to execute people for non-capital crimes, and that's called ta'zir in the code. In the code. So he made this. He codified it because before then, the Saudi state, it was repressive, but it did not carry executions for against people who did not kill, who did not commit capital crimes like murder and bombing and so on. So, but this court carried hundreds of or rendered hundreds of death penalties because it was Al-Issa who designed, and he was the architect of this court and these laws, and he modernized it to be more efficient. So he is really a person who he's now the head of something called the World Muslim League, which is a Saudi government front, and it's a part of the public relation campaign that they have been waging. And so he is guilty in these crimes. And so for the US to say we promote democracy around the world and then not only receive him, I would understand if you have to work with bad people. I totally do. But at the same time, you receive him 2 days after killing 81 people and praising him for combating anti-Semitism. In fact, we had a report last year detailing his sermons, calling Jews evil and eternally evil. That's what really disturbing. Sometimes, if you call al-Ahmed is a bad guy, but if you say al-Ahmed and his offsprings are all bad, that is like way above the sort of, So it was a disgusting part. They were disgusting sermons, and we translated them and we shared them. I know there are people within the Jewish community who are, washing his image, because now he has established relationship with some of the sort of right-wing Jewish entities in this country, and are praising him, including the last ambassador to combat anti-Semitism and others, who said Al-Issa is a great guy. When we showed them the sermons, they said, "Oh, this was old." But so they only focused on one issue. So you can kill, you can torture, you can do this, as long as you say, "Oh, I'm combating anti-Semitism." You are now.
I saw they took him to Auschwitz, and
yes,
he did the usual.
But a few years before he went to Auschwitz, look what he said about Jews. So if you are 60 years old and you've been saying this for 60 years, and 6 months now you change your opinion, I would not forget what you did over the past 60 years. And while you continue to engage in massive human rights violations, like executing protesters, including children, torture and abuse of women's rights, and sectarian and carry on apartheid courts, because the Saudi courts are apartheid courts. You like it or not, they are apartheid courts, because you are not allowed in the Saudi court system to be a judge if you are black or Shia or a woman or non-Wahhabi. And this is apartheid. Some people are uncomfortable saying it, but this is the fact. And if they're not comfortable with it, it's up to them. But we are going to speak. We'll say, no matter who you are, if you praise a human right criminal, you are engaging in supporting these crimes and in massacre denial and all of that, all of these bad things. You can't excuse this meeting and the praising of this very bad individuals. I'm surprised that he was even allowed into the United States, because the U.S. law stipulate that a person engaging in this is automatically barred from entering the United States.
What about the one seemingly good piece of news, the release of Raif al-Badawi after 10 years in prison?
Yeah, Raif Badawi, his case is one of those cases that really is a tragedy in many ways, because Raif Badawi spent over 10 years in prison for basically doing nothing. And his release, people were joyful and say it's great news, but 10 years, you spend 10 years in prison for doing no crime. And then when you leave prison, you're not allowed to leave the country, and you're not even allowed, and you're too worried or too afraid to publish a picture or to open a Twitter account. Raif Badawi continues to be a prisoner within the Saudi big prison. Saudi Arabia is a big prison. So Saudi Arabia releasing him from a small prison to a big prison I don't think it's good news. He's maybe able to call his wife and kids in Canada, but he's not free. And I noticed one thing, that none of those people who carried water and made him into the champion he was and the icon he was, the State Department said nothing about him after his release. And none of those European states have said anything about him. Even the Canadian government, where his kids and wife didn't say anything. I must say, for historical purposes here, Raif Badawi's case was used by many in the West to cover up or to distract from real cases. Raif was never this personality within the country that had any sort of influence or much of influence comparing to others like Dr. Mohamad Al-Qahtani and Abdullah Al-Hamid and Namar al-Namr and other sort of national figures who actually advocated for democracy, for human rights, who faced the government down. And their cases happened at the same time where Raif Badawi's case happened. But I think there was a sinister goal here is to use Raif Badawi's case to sort of to hide, to create a shield away from the cases of like what we call Hasm, Dr. Al-Qahtani, al-Ahmed, and other intellectuals who created a movement within the country demanding constitutional monarchy, an elected parliament. And these people's cases did not receive 10% or 5% of the attention that Raif Badawi's case received, and none of them received awards and prizes that Raif Badawi received. And Raif Badawi, like I said, he is not a writer. He doesn't even have a high school degree. But unfortunately, we live in a time where creating these fake personalities or icons happen. And this is one case where we saw that. And I have these discussions with several of these organizations that wanted only to talk about Raif Badawi, but ignore sort of the more important figures. This is not to say Raif Badawi should not receive attention, but in terms of the sort of the totality of the situation in the country, there were other pressing cases, and more important, if we were interested in promoting democracy and human rights and freedoms of all types, other individuals were their cases were much more interesting and influential in terms on the ground in that country. And Dr. Qahtani, PhD from Temple University, from Indiana, I'm sorry, and others who have PhDs and intellectuals, these people should have been focused upon.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.